Hi, George here, and today we'll be doing a controlled background blur here on this photograph. This is the original look right here. We'll be doing a blur like this where we have more blur in the background, but we're not adding any blur here into the foreground area, so it's very controlled background blur. It's an easy project, and I'm doing this in Affinity Photo 2.6, and I'll start off by just deleting all of these layers over here. Trash those out. There we go. So here's the original image. We'll be working from this picture. If you want to use the same image, I have a link for this in the description. Now, before we get into this, if you want to learn everything about how to use Affinity Photo, I have a complete video training course for this program, and I'll put a link for that in the description. Make sure you check that out after you watch this video. Okay, the first thing we need to do here is just to make two duplicates of this background layer. So right-click on the layer and choose Duplicate. Right-click again and do that one more time. So we have three layers in here. The background is going to be the unblurred layer. The middle layer here, this is going to be our blur layer. Let's just double click in here and rename this blur. And the top one will be our subject. There we go. I'm going to hide that subject layer for right now. And let's work on the blur layer. Now to put a nice blur in here, I like using the Gaussian blur. Go up here to filters, come down to blur. You can use any blur you like. This is just my personal favorite for this one. Does a real nice blur job. Now this is easily controllable here with a slider control. You can go real blurry or unblurry down here. Now notice the edge over here. If I go real super blurry, notice how the edge actually bleeds out a little bit. It gets a bit larger in there. We don't want to go that far so that we're getting into that bleeding. So what you want is more blur than we had, but not too much blur. I'm going to start off here with a blur right about 3.5. If you want, you can type that in, 3.5. There we go. And I'll be showing you how you can change the blur later on if you're not happy with that once you get everything else done, which is a real nice trick. You can actually go in here and kind of adjust it when everything is in place. Okay, choose Apply. So there's our basic blur. Now in behind that, if I hide that layer, we have our in focus layer and the blur layer on top. We now want to just show the blur where we want it blurred and not show it anyplace else. Basically, we want a blurred upper left-hand corner and not blurred over here on the right-hand side. And that's pretty easy to do. Let's come down here and apply a layer mask. Click on Mask Layer. It's our layer mask. I'm going to open this up here. So the mask is selected. Over here, left-hand side, and grab this tool right here. This is the gradient tool. By default, this is going to be black to white. You can see that up here on the colors, black left-hand side, white right-hand side. That's what we want. Black hides and white shows. I want to be showing this layer up here and hiding it over here. And I'll start like this, and I'll pull down like that. So notice it begins with white, and that's showing that blur area, and it's coming down to black, and that's hiding that blur area. You can see that if I grab this here, you can actually move this around and adjust where your blur is going in. As I go over here, we get more blur showing. If I go over here, you get less blur showing. So that creates that blur gradient for us going clear across. And I'm going to put it right around here. I think that's pretty good. So right over here someplace, we have a nice blur happening back here and no blur on the right-hand side, which is exactly what we're looking for. Let's double check that. Go over here to the blur layer, hide the blur, and show the blur. So we have a nice blur happening in the background and not happening over here. Perfect. Okay, now we want to bring our subject back in again, and we want just the subject in here and not the background. So for that, since we're in 2.6 now, we can go up here to Select, come down to Select Subject. Let's let Affinity Photo go in, find the subject, and give us our selection. Great new tool that was just added here in 2.6. There we go. Now, whenever there's hair like this, I like to refine the edge around the hair to get the best selection. It's okay every place else, but the hair needs a bit of help. So let's go over here, left-hand side, and just grab the Marquee tool. And that gives us access up here to the Refine Selection button. Click on that. Now, the first time you use this, it may take just a moment or two, so just do a little bit like that. Let it figure it out. If it finishes, then you're fine. And do this in just short steps. All I care about is the hair. And let's go around the top up here. Now, once we're over here, we already have a sharp background, so it's not that important. But I'll show you the process anyway. When you have areas showing through hair like that, just brush in from the outside. And it will spot those hairs for you and do a real nice clean job. Okay, there we go. There's our selection. Let's come down here. Now I want this coming out as a mask and not a selection. So click on Mask, choose Apply, And there we go. Perfect selection around there. Notice it's absolutely perfect on that. Affinity Photo is great on doing this kind of hair selections. And there's a nice controlled background. We can see that again if I hide and show the blur layer. There's without, here's with. Let's say you want a more blur. That's easy to do. Make sure you're on the blur layer and not the mask layer. And then go up here to filters, come back down to blur and back to the Gaussian blur. And you can now actually change the blur on that layer right here with everything else in place. You get exactly the amount of blur that you want. This is why I call this a controlled background blur. Gives you perfect control over the look on that blur. And I'll go up here to a 4.2, maybe just a 4. I'll just type that in. There we go. And apply. And don't forget, if you want to learn everything about how to use Affinity Photo, I have a great video course on that. Covers everything, all the tools, all the panels, all the menus, everything. And I'll put a link for that right at the top of the description. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe as well so you don't miss any videos in the future. And hit that bell icon as well while you're at it. And I'll see you next time.